Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is 3 p.m. here in Cairo. Time for the news bulletin from Nile TV International and Channel 2. My name is Amal Mukhtar. I have all the pleasure to be joined with my dear colleague, Lubna Yahya.
Hello, Lubna. Hello, dear viewers. We're going to start right away with the headlines. Prime Minister Madbouli chairs a weekly cabinet meeting on important domestic files. Minister of Foreign Affairs Abdulati receives the Djiboutian Parliament Speaker and hails the historic ties binding both countries.
Welcome back. The news in detail. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli today chaired a weekly cabinet meeting which tackled a number of political, economic and social files. The meeting also followed up the implementation of presidential directives with regards to intensifying efforts for curbing inflation, increasing expenditure on the health, education and social protection sectors, monitoring commodity markets and completing work at different development projects nationwide in line with Egypt's comprehensive development vision of the year 2030.
Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs Badr Abdulati today asserted that Africa faces unprecedented challenges which hampers its ability to achieve the goals and ambitions outlined the 2063 agenda. Abdulati made these remarks as he took part in a ministerial meeting of the African Union's Peace and Security Council, addressing the security challenges in the continent and adopting more positive strategies to support African nations in this regard. The top diplomat reiterated Egypt's firm commitment to enhancing security, peace and development in Africa.
Minister of Foreign Affairs, Migration and Expatriate Affairs Badr Abdulati today said that Egypt is looking forward to promote ties with African nations and oversee new opportunities for mutual cooperation serving common interests. The minister made these remarks in separate phone calls with his counterparts from Benin and Comoros Islands, along with the Deputy Foreign Minister of Sierra Leone. The conversations have stressed supporting African issues and exchanging nominations, especially at the international African events. Abdulati also reiterated that the importance of holding continued consultations on different issues of mutual concern, pointing out to the importance of activating the joint committees in the political, economic, trade and investment fields.
Minister of Foreign Migration and Egyptian Expatriates Affairs Badr Abdulati today hailed the historic ties binding Egypt and Djibouti, stressing the importance of stepped-up efforts for boosting bilateral cooperation in different fields. Abdulati made these remarks as he met Djiboutian Parliament Speaker Dilayet Mohammed, pressing for the creation of an Egyptian-Djiboutian Friendship Committee by the Senates of the two countries, as well as activating the role of existing parliamentary committees of the House of Representatives.
The Israeli occupation forces intensified airstrikes today, killing at least 22 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip as forces stepped up bombardment on central areas and pushed tanks deeper in the north and south of
the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that U.S. President Joe Biden will launch a renewed drive for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal after Israel and Hezbollah began a truce in Lebanon. Sullivan noted that Biden intends to begin that work today by having his envoys engage with Turkey, Qatar, Egypt and other actors in the region. He added that Biden's administration was also in touch with the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump team on the issue. The Israel-Hezbollah deal brokered by the United States and France was a rare boost for Biden as he prepares to leave the White House and hand over to Trump on January the 20th.
Israeli occupation tanks fire hit 3 towns along Lebanon's southeast border today, a day after a ceasefire barring offensive military operations came into force. A ceasefire between Israeli occupation forces and Lebanon took effect late yesterday under a deal brokered by the U.S. and France intended to allow Lebanese to start returning to their homes in border areas shattered by 14 months of Israeli occupation fierce attacks. Under the ceasefire terms, Israeli occupation forces can take up to 60 days to withdraw from southern Lebanon. However, the occupation troops remained stationed within Lebanese territory in towns along the border and this morning told residents of towns along the border strip not to return yet.
Lebanon's army, which is tasked with helping make sure the ceasefire holds, said in a statement today that it was preparing to deploy the south of the country. The Lebanese military also asked the residents of border villages to delay returning home until the Israeli military, which has waged war against Hezbollah on several occasions and pushed around 6 kilometers into Lebanese territory, withdraws.
Lebanese group Hezbollah has said it had achieved a victory over the Israeli occupation forces and that its fighters were at the ready. In its first statement since the truce took effect, the occupation forces have launched an intensified bombing campaign targeting Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon on the 23rd of September and later sent in ground troops. More than 3,700 people have been killed by Israeli occupation fire in Lebanon since the start of the occupation aggression, many of them civilians.
Lebanon announced today that the country's parliament will meet on January 9 to elect a new president, seeking to end more than 2 years without a head of state, a day after a ceasefire began between Lebanon and the Israeli occupation forces. The official Lebanese national news agency reported that the country's speaker, Nabih Berri, called a parliament session to elect a president of the republic on January 9. Berri, who led ceasefire talks on behalf of Hezbollah, also called for the country to quickly elect a president.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said he would appoint Keith Kellogg, retired Lieutenant General, as his special envoy for the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Trump has pledged to secure a swift end to the Ukraine war, boasting that he would quickly mediate a ceasefire deal between Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. However, Ukraine has received almost $60 billion from Washington for its armed forces since Russia launched the full-scale military operations in February 2022. Well, Ukraine, yes.
Ukraine announced today that its Air Force shot down 79 out of 91 missiles launched by Russia during its attack targeting the country's energy infrastructure. Earlier in the day, Russia carried out its second big attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure this month, cutting power to at least 1 million people across 3 western regions of the country. More details followed.
The President Vladimir Zelensky said that Russia fired cluster munitions at his country's energy facilities in its massive attack today, slamming it as a despicable escalation by Moscow. Cluster munitions can be dropped from planes or fired from artillery and missiles, exploding mid-air and scattering bomblets over a wide area. Experts say both Kiev and Moscow have used them in almost 3-year war. The barrage, in which Ukraine downed 79 missiles and 35 drones, left over 1 million Ukrainians without electricity in freezing cold temperatures. The Cluster Munition Coalition, CMC, said in its annual report in September cluster munitions have killed or wounded over 1,000 people in Ukraine since Russia launched its war in February 2022. The CMC added they also pose a long-term risk since many fail to explode on impact, effectively acting as landmines and can explode years later, the CMC noted. Neither Russia nor Ukraine is among the 112 states that are party to the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions, which prohibits the use, transfer, and production of storage of cluster bombs. The United States, also not a party to the treaty, had agreed to transfer cluster munitions in Kiev in July 2023, a move that was criticized even by the two countries' allies. Russia previously staged 10 massive attacks on the country's energy infrastructure, which hobbled the system and spurred fears of long power cuts ahead of the winter months.
Now with the economy news, as Egypt's markets firmed at the start of today's dealings amid Arab and foreign investors' purchases against local investor sell-offs. The market capital of listed companies settled above £2.1 trillion. The benchmark index EGX 30 rose 0.2% above the 29,916-point mark. The equal-weighted indices EGX 70 and the EGX 100 climbed 0.4% and 0.2% respectively.
Oil prices were steady today as worries over Middle East supply disruptions eased day after a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. Brent crude futures were at little changed at $72.8 a barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was steady at $68.7. Meanwhile, OPEC announced that the cartel has postponed its next meeting on output policy to December 5 from December 1 to avoid a conflict with another event.
Well, with this, my dear viewers, we come to the end of the news bulletin. My name is Amal Mukhtar. I thank very much my dear colleague Lubna Yahya. Thank you,
Amal. Thank you, dear viewers, and have a good evening.